Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to Sandal College Boys Section Online Class 8. Dear students, Assalamu alaikum. Here is Akhtar Saeed, your English teacher, with another lecture on unit number 1, that is the poem The Newcomer, composed by Patten. As you know, these days we are doing our exercises. So open your books at page 18. We'll resume our exercises. Part C. Part C is learning about language. Dear students, today we'll discuss clauses. I would like to define what clauses are. Clauses are groups of words containing both subject and predicate. Dear students, before going on, I would like to tell you what a subject is and what a predicate is in a clause. Subject is a part of a sentence that contains the person or thing performing the action in a sentence. So the subject is actually the doer of the action. You may also call that subject is an actor that performs something. For example, Alian writes a letter. In this sentence, Alian is a subject because Alian is doing something. He is an actor. What he is doing? Writing a letter. Alian writes a letter. So Alian, that is the doer of the action, is called subject. Now predicate. Predicate is a part of a sentence or a clause that tells what the subject is doing. Actually, what the action done by the subject is called predicate. The same is a sentence again here. Alian writes a letter. In this clause, in this sentence, writes a letter is a predicate because this is the action done by the subject Alian. So Alian is a subject and writes a letter is a predicate. Now once again we discuss what clauses are. I hope now you can understand clauses better. Clauses are groups of words containing both subject and predicate. Almost all sentences contain at least one clause. When a clause stands on its own, we call this a sentence. This is a clause because it stands on its own. It is a complete sentence. This sentence conveys the complete meaning, so this clause can be called a sentence. However, a clause is usually part of another sentence since it qualifies some word or words in that sentence. Page number 19. Here are some sentences which consist of a single clause. That boy is my brother. Silently the ship left the harbor. She can read a book. All these sentences are clauses because all these sentences can stand on their own. They convey the complete meaning. Now question number 1. What is the question? Notice that each clause, these clauses, has a subject and a predicate. Can you divide the sentences above into subject and predicate? That boy is my brother. Can you tell me what is a subject in this clause? Yes, that boy. That boy is a subject. You can underline it and you can write subject over it. Is my brother is predicate. Is my brother is telling something about this subject, that boy. That's why it is predicate. Silently the ship left the harbor. Silently the ship left the harbor. Can you tell me what is a subject here? Keep it in mind, it is not necessary that the subject is always in the beginning of the sentence. Actually, we should see what is the person or thing that is doing something. Here the ship is a subject that is doing something. The ship left the harbor. What is its action? The action of the subject is that the ship left the harbor. So left the harbor is the predicate. The subject is the ship and the rest of the sentence silently left the harbor is the predicate of this clause. She can read a book. Can you tell me what is the subject here? Yes, she. She is the subject here because she is doing something. What she is doing? She can read a book. can read a book is a predicate. So she is a subject and can read a book is predicate. Now let's move towards the next question. Dear students, now let's move a step further. Longer sentences have more than one clause. They may contain a main clause and a subordinate clause. Main clauses do not depend on any other clause. They are also called independent clauses. They can stand by themselves as independent clauses. Now let's see some examples. That boy is my brother and this girl is my sister. It is a complete sentence. This sentence has two clauses. That boy is my brother and the second clause is this girl is my sister. If you remove either of the clause, the other clause conveys the complete meaning. For example, if you remove that boy is my brother, अगर आप इसको हटा दें this girl is my sister, ये हमें complete meaning convey करती है, इसलिए आप इसको independent clause कह सकते हैं. That boy is my brother is also an independent clause. She can read a book or she can write a letter. Again, both clauses are independent clauses. She can read a book. If you remove this clause, the other clause, she can write a letter, that conveys the complete meaning. That's why this clause is called independent clause. She can read a book is also an independent clause. If two independent clauses are joined in one sentence, they may also be called coordinate clauses, coordinating clauses. And the words like and, are joining these two clauses, they are called conjunctions, coordinating conjunctions. Now dear students, let's see what is a main clause or independent clause and what is the subordinate clause. The man left the room before the guests arrived. The man left the room is the main clause or the independent clause. Before the guests arrived is a subordinate clause. इसको subordinate clause क्यों कहते हैं? क्योंकि अगर आप इस सेंटेंस को रिमूव कर दें द मैन लेफ्ट द रूम, तो ये जो क्लॉज है ये कंप्लीट मीनिंग कन्वे नहीं करती. बिफोर द गेस्ट्स अराइव्ड, तो गेस्ट्स के आने से पहले क्या हुआ हमें नहीं पता, इसलिए ये सबॉर्डिनेट क्लॉज है. द मैन लेफ्ट द रूम ये मेन क्लॉज इसलिए है कि अगर आप इस क्लॉज को हटा भी दें, रिमूव भी कर दें, तो ये वाली क्लॉज कंप्लीट मीनिंग कन्वे करती है, इसलिए आप इसको मेन क्लॉज या इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉज कह सकते हैं. दे सॉ द मैन हु स्टोल द कार. दे सॉ द मैन इज द मेन क्लॉज. हु स्टोल द कार, it is a subordinate clause. We may get some help is a main clause. If the man arrive, it is the subordinate clause. She went to the park is the main clause or independent clause. When the sun began to shine is a subordinate clause, because if you remove this clause, she went to the park, this clause does not convey the complete meaning. That's why it is a subordinate clause. Though this clause has a subject, the sun began to shine is the predicate, yet it is subordinate clause because it depends upon the other clause to convey its complete meaning. She went to the park is the main clause because if you remove this clause, since it conveys the complete meaning, she went to the park, ये हमें कंप्लीट मीनिंग कन्वे करता है, इसलिए इस पार्ट को आप मेन क्लॉज या इंडिपेंडेंट क्लॉज कह सकते हैं. Question number 2. Question number 2 is underline the main clauses in the following sentences. Very interesting question. Here come the sentences from A to J. We are to underline the main clauses in these sentences. The first one is A. The children went to the park after they had their lunch. Can you tell me what is the main clause here? The children went to the park is the main clause. You can also call it independent clause. The main clause is the clause that can stand on its own, and subordinate clause is the clause that does not stand its own. For example, if you remove this clause, the children went to the park, the other clause after they had their lunch does not convey its meaning. it depends upon the main clause to complete its meaning. So it is a subordinate clause or dependent clause. B. Maham went to the library though she didn't want to. Can you tell me what is the main clause here? Maham went to the library is the main clause, is the independent clause, because even if you remove this clause, it conveys the complete meaning. Maham went to the library. But if you remove this clause, Maham went to the library, this clause, though she didn't want to, does not convey complete meaning. It depends upon the main clause to complete its meaning. C. We stopped at the town where my father was born. Can you tell me what is the main clause? We stopped at the town is the main clause, and where my father was born is the subordinate clause. Now D. When the sun came out, the boys went out to play football. Can you tell me what is the main clause? And dear students, always keep it in mind that main clause is not necessary is in the beginning. It can be after the subordinate clause, as this is the example. When the sun came out is not a complete sentence. It is a subordinate clause. The boys went out to play football is the main clause, because if you remove this clause, the boys went out to play football, this clause, when the sun came out, does not convey its complete meaning. It depends upon the main clause to complete the meaning. E. After the play was over, the actors met the children. What is the main clause? The actors met the children is the main clause, and after the play was over is the subordinate clause, because it depends upon the other clause to complete the meaning. If you remove this clause, after the play was over, this clause conveys its complete meaning. What is that? The actors met the children. That's why it is independent clause or main clause. He came when I called. What is the main clause? He came. In this sentence, he came is the main clause, and when I called is the subordinate clause or dependent clause. G. The man went where I asked him to go. In this sentence, the man went is the main clause. H. The trees died because there was no rain. In this sentence, the trees died is the main clause. The trees is the subject, died is the predicate. You know, a clause has two parts, subject and predicate. Because there was no rain is the subordinate clause. I. If Amar comes, we shall all go to the park. What is the main clause? We shall go to the park is the main clause. If Amar comes is the subordinate clause. Last but not the least, J. The policeman arrested the men who broke into the shop. Can you tell me what is the main clause? What is the independent clause? That is, the policeman arrested the men. It is the main clause. Who broke into the shop is the subordinate clause. Main clause conveys its complete meaning, and subordinate clause never conveys its complete meaning. So here in this part of the sentence, the policeman arrested the men is the main clause. That's all of today's lecture, dear students. You might have understood all the questions and their answers. If you have any question, if you have any problem, you may comment in the comment section, and inshallah I'll be there to answer your questions. Till some next lecture, take a very good care of yourselves and your dear ones. Thank you very much.